I am predominantly Chinese, and have always valued my Chinese heritage. Growing up in Hawaii, a state that's roughly 42% Asian and 25% Caucasian, I never felt as if I was a minority. I was able to watch local news or walk around downtown and see people who looked similar to me. It wasn't until I went to a private middle and high school where I really experienced what it felt like to be different. My new school didn't share the same racial diversity that the state portrayed. Instead, the school was majority Caucasian. It was in this environment that I realized that I was viewed solely on the stereotypes that were placed on my ethnic community, and it was from this experience that I realized that others of my same ethnic background must have experienced similar events. I wondered, how do racial discrimination still exist in society, and how do they affect people's overall well-being? Stereotypes are tools used by dominant groups to categorize and label other groups to create an us versus them mentality. Being in the them category has many negative impacts on an individual's well-being. Research done by the U.S. Surgeon General found that ethnic and racial minorities in the United States face a social and economic environment of inequality that includes greater exposure to racism and discrimination, violence, and poverty, all of which take a toll on mental health, and place minorities at risk for mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety. In my personal experience, I was outcast based on the way I looked, and that not only built anxiety and stress, but I began to believe that the treatment I received was justified. I believed that based on my ethnicity, I was less than other groups. We all know that stereotyping is bad, and that it often incorrectly categorizes large communities. But we often don't know the full extent of the impacts that stereotypes have on people's lives. Psychologist Michael Inzit conducted an experiment and distressed his participants by discriminating against them. He then tested his subjects' logical decision-making by making them choose a lottery they wanted to enter. Those who were distressed chose a lottery with extremely high risk and very little possibility to win. The author then concluded, after other experiments, that stereotype threat spillover contributes to a number of social problems, with aggression, obesity, risky decisions, and poor intention only being a small subset of these. To illustrate current stereotypes and discriminations entwined within our country and community, researcher Yin Wang interviewed international Chinese college students at Columbia University. These students come from a largely homogeneous society and have not experienced prejudice based on race. However, once they came to the U.S., they were racialized as Asian, a minority group within the white-dominated society. They became minorities, and they also have to encounter racial stereotypes, racism, and racial problems associated with their new racial identities. This is what happened in my high school experience. I felt as if I was an immigrant in a school of actual immigrants. I quickly experienced what it was like being a minority and a subdominant group, and it changed the way I viewed myself and my culture. Aside from the outright negative stereotypes, there are others with possibly positive connotations, but the rhetoric still supports racial dominance. A large term used towards the Chinese Asian population is model minority. This is a term that detaches Asians from their association with other racial minorities by hailing them as a white-appointed model, while it distinguishes them from unmarked true nationals by calling Asians their minor. This mentality towards Chinese American students is clearly seen in the media. An author recently wrote an article titled "The Asian Advantage" that mainly focused on the success of Asian Americans. The author neglected to include that culture could be the reason Asian Americans do so well academically, but culture is also the reason many Asian students are exhausted, depressed, and self-destructive. Yes, many Asian Americans do experience academic success, but they also face a large pressure to do so as well. That pressure causes a lot of stress and leads to a decline in mental health. Another stereotype used by the author was that Asians are good at math, but the author also didn't include that it leads to an implicit bias that Asians are only good in math. Asian Americans are often assumed to possess lower leadership potential than white applicants with identical qualifications, and my high school is never seen as a leader, but rather solely as an intellectual. Through this project, I am by no means trying to villainize the community, but rather spread awareness about the stereotypes and its effects on the Chinese population. The use of dominant or racial rhetoric has lasting negative effects on an individual. In high school, I experienced what it was like to be a minority. I was judged by my ethnic stereotypes, and that categorization not only affected how others viewed me, but how I viewed myself. I hope in the future this vocabulary is minimized, and that communities of different ethnic backgrounds can connect and relate to one another.